Tonight, we cross into the hush where the world behaves strangely. We will walk slowly, listen closely, and let wonder do most of the work. Mysterious places are not only riddles to be solved. They are invitations to pay attention, to notice the soft edges where science and story touch. Imagine stepping into warm, still water beneath a moon that has pulled the tides into a quiet breath. The shore is dark, the mangroves whisper, and the night seems like velvet pressed against your skin. Your hand trails through the bay, and a glow blooms. First a spark, then a soft blue burst, like a stirred constellation. The water answers your movement with light, each ripple a quiet firework. You lift your fingers, and tiny galaxies drip back into the sea. This is a bioluminescent bay, like the famed Mosquito Bay on Vieques in Puerto Rico. The glow comes from millions of single-celled drifters, dinoflagellates with names that hum in the mouth, such as Pyrodinium bahamense. When they are jostled, they flicker. It is chemistry in a dance with touch. A molecule called luciferin meets oxygen, helped by an enzyme, and there is light. The bay is shallow, warm, and sheltered, shaped like a cupped hand that keeps the tiny living lamps close. Mangroves feed nutrients into the water. The mouth of the bay is narrow, so the ocean does not flush the light away. Add the rhythm of calm tropical nights, and the result is a lagoon that remembers your footsteps as brightness. It feels like magic. It is not a trick, yet it casts the same quiet spell. The science is gentle and present, and the sensation is the rest. If you listen, you can hear a truth that hums beneath all our journeys. Mystery is not the absence of explanation. Mystery is the presence of more than one kind of meaning, the feeling of standing between what you know and what you can feel. We will keep that feeling as we wander. Some mysteries glow in the dark. Others move without obvious cause. On a high desert plain in California, the ground spreads like a wide empty table covered by thin porcelain. The racetrack playa in Death Valley is a dry lake bed, flat as a held breath. Scattered across it lie stones. They are not special to look at. Small, dark, ordinary. But each has trailed a long, pale groove behind it, as if the stone woke up one night, slid across the playa, and then fell asleep again. Some trails stretch for dozens of meters. Some curve gently, some intersect, as if the stones were wandering and changing their minds. For decades, people stood in the heat and puzzled. Winds sweep over the playa, but stones are heavy. The ground is hard and dusty, not slick. Stories grew. Maybe a trick of magnetism. Maybe a conspiracy of pranksters. Maybe a tender nudge from something we have not named. The desert kept its quiet. The stones were patient. Patience is one of the themes here. The world is old, and the pieces of its puzzles often move on slow machinery. Out on the coast of Northern Ireland, where sea spray threads the air with salt, an entire playground of hexagons is laid out in the salt. The Giant's Causeway looks like a mosaic left by a careful hand. Stone columns stand shoulder to shoulder, most with 6 neat sides, some with 5 or 7, all pressed together like cells in a honeycomb. They rise like organ pipes, they crumble into rocky steps, they vanish into the sea where waves chew at their edges. The story begins in heat and ends in geometry. Around 60 million years ago, lava poured from the earth and spread in a dark sheet. Then it began to cool. As heat leaked away, the basalt shrank and cracked. To share the stress, the cracks branched and split, and the most efficient pattern, the one that fits together without gaps and distributes strain, is a hexagon. It is the same solution bees choose when they build their storage rooms for honey. The columns formed piece by piece, like a crystal growing, chamber by chamber, and became a field of petrified music. If you run your fingers along a column, you can feel the striations, the chilled memory of molten rock taking shape. These are the mysteries I love, the ones that give themselves to you slowly, the ones that wait for time to do the explaining, while your senses find other meanings to hold. Some mysteries stay longer. Out in the Atlantic, in a stretch of sea, bounded roughly by Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, stories of vanished ships and planes gather like fog. The Bermuda Triangle is not a mapped box, not an official zone. It is a patchwork of weather and currents and charts and imagination. It is also a lesson about how attention works. Ships go missing across oceans, yes. Storms rise in many latitudes. But the triangle, for a time, held a kind of glamour. It was easy to connect the dots that fit the pattern we were watching for, to call the sea a thief. Science hummed softly beneath the myths. The Gulf Stream moves like a river in the ocean there, fast enough to tug a drifting vessel away from its last known position. Weather flips from calm to contrary in that warm, humid bubble where air climbs, cools, and tumbles into storms. Instruments fail when maintenance falters. Pilots make mistakes when their senses are tricked by a sky that offers no horizon to the eye, and small planes have short temperaments with icing and fuel. We will come back to this sea, but for now, breathe. Feel the way a story can cling, even when explanations stand ready. There is something about the human mind that loves the idea of a map with a soft-edged danger in the corner. Some mysteries you can hold. Others you can stand in and feel a small pressure behind the ribs. The sense that the world is brimming with more rules than we have collected. Tonight, I would like to visit both. We will keep the pace slow, the voice low. Imagine a candle cupped between palms. Imagine your feet in warm water under stars. Imagine a desert stone thinking about moving. There is a place where rain disappears. A waterfall splits itself into two, one stream continuing on, the other dropping into a dark hole, as if the river had a secret drainage. People drop dyes and logs and small bright balls into the churning mouth. The objects vanished. The river did not swell downstream. The logic of water seemed to have lost a step. They named it Devil's Kettle in northern Minnesota, a notch in rhyolite where the Brule River divides on its way through Judge C.R. Magny State Park. It became a story told with hands raised and eyebrows lifted. How can a river lose part of itself into rock? We will find out, but not yet. Let the cliffhanger hang softly in the air. Let the roar of water settle into the background of your breathing. Let curiosity be a light we do not have to chase. The most mysterious places do not hurry. They are patient, and they reward slow attention. We have dipped our hands in glowing seas. We have stood on cooled honeycombs. We have looked out at a triangle of ocean and whispered about vanishings. In a moment, we will begin to trace the first lines of explanation, the early guesses, the pattern making that poured into these places long before instruments caught up. We will speak softly about ancient lines scratched into desert floors, and stones that walk when no one is watching. We will let the old ideas keep us company as the newer ones arrive. When the mind is calm, truth has a way of feeling like wonder instead of a quarrel. Early explanations are like first drafts written in the dark. People see something they cannot quite fit, and they reach for metaphors and memory. The world's strangest places have always been magnets for stories, and those stories have footprints. They show us what people were paying attention to long before the measurements were exact. In the dry air of southern Peru, a high plateau wears a veil of lines and shapes so wide that they resolve only when you rise above them. The Nazca Lines spread across the pampa like quiet signatures. There are straight lines and trapezoids that stretch for kilometers. There are shapes of animals and plants, and a long-limbed figure with eyes wide like a surprised child. For centuries, people walked across them without seeing the full picture. The desert preserved the pale exposed ground where stones had been removed, protected by the drought and the steady wind. When flight became part of the human hand, when pilots began to look down from canvas and wood, the geoglyphs placed themselves on the page of the sky. Explanations came like birds of different feathers. Some said they were signals to travelers from elsewhere. Others imagined runways or sky maps. The researchers who walked the lines, surveyed patiently, and read the local stories found meanings that feel closer to the ground. The Nazca built their lines by moving the iron-stained pebbles aside to reveal the pale soil beneath. They could not climb into airplanes, but they could use hills for vantage points and ropes to keep paths straight. Many lines align with the path of the sun at solstice, or mark the direction of water sources. Some shapes seem to be connected to rituals for rain in a landscape where every drop matters. Mystery remains, yes, but it is a human kind of mystery. How did the people who lived here imagine their relationship with the sky and the ground? How did they tell the weather with symbols? The sand holds their careful work. The wind erases footsteps and leaves the drawings intact. Across the sea and far to the north, another circle of stones rises from grass. We will not linger long at Stonehenge, because so many voices have already told its story, but it belongs for a moment in our company. Massive slabs arranged with a simplicity that feels like a spell. Light threads between stones at particular times of year. The stones draw your attention to a horizon that turns. Early explanations reached for giants again, or druids, or vanished empires. The stones are heavy, the distance is long, the bare hands improbable. Yet we know how people can carry weight when time is deep and motivation is practical and ceremonial at once. We can imagine sledges and logs and mud, ropes twisted from plants, hundreds of shoulders moving together, and the slow architecture of weather and sky that early farmers placed at the center of their year. Then there is the sea's rumor of hunger. The Bermuda Triangle gathered a story shaped like a shadow. Newspapers carried tales of planes that left a runway and never arrived. Boats that sent a message and then went quiet. The early explanations leaned toward enchantment or anomaly. Magnetic compasses misbehaving. Methane bubbles rising from the seafloor to remove the ocean's buoyancy and swallow ships. A geometry with teeth. The science does not require such teeth to bite. Methane hydrates do exist under parts of the sea, but the kind of release that could sink a ship would leave traces, and the statistics of loss tell a calmer story. The waters of the triangle are busy. The storms can be sudden and severe, the currents fast. Human error and weather are often enough. The triangle may be more mirror than monster, reflecting our love of a map with a legend written in bold letters. On land, curiosity often wears a good pair of boots. For the walking stones of racetrack playa, early ideas drifted through campfire talk. Could quakes shimmy the stones? Could they jump with frost? Could mischief be long-lived and carefully done? The grooves were stranger the longer you looked. Some stones with long tails, others changing direction. There were also places where stones sat on old trails that did not match their shape, as if the stone had been replaced. People tried to move them and found them stubborn. Scientists set up time-lapse cameras and instruments that waited longer than any weekend camping trip could afford. The desert is not hurried by our attention. Where the Brule River split itself in Minnesota, Devil's Kettle became a textbook tucked into a forest. In the decades before simple GPS tags and dye traces were used, visitors dropped objects into the hole and watched nothing return. Curiosity wrote words like portal and underground river. The rock is not limestone riddled by caves. It is rhyolite and a dike of basalt, tougher stuff. If there was a hidden channel, it would need a path back to the main river, or the water would build a secret lake within the hillside, and the land would slump and crack. But the forest remained smooth. The water continued. This shaped an early humility. The explanation might be unromantic, or it might require instruments that would go where our bodies cannot. Benign mysteries are still their own kind of music, and they do not mind waiting for a better ear. Some places invite us to argue about who made them. Just off Yonaguni Island in Japan, divers discovered a series of underwater steps, terraces, and flat plains that look like a drowned stage. The Yonaguni Monument is cut into sandstone and mudstone, layers that naturally form flat plains that break along joints. The sea is full of edges where rock splits with clean precision. Yet the site, with its right angles and looming geometry, feels like architecture. Some have argued that human hands carved it thousands of years ago, that it is the footprint of a lost settlement. Others see a dressed-up natural formation, tidied by wave action and the mind's eagerness to find patterns. Geologists point to local bedding planes and fracture networks that match the angles below. Divers point to what looks like steps and roadways. The ocean keeps the silence of a library. There is room, even in science, for debates that remain neighborly, and for the knowledge that erosion can mimic mason lines with eerie fidelity. Then there are places where the sky itself seems to be a storyteller. In a long valley in central Norway, people have watched lights that hover and drift. Hesteland lights. They appear as bright orbs or diffused glows, sometimes moving slowly, sometimes flashing. They have been recorded and measured, coaxed into data. Early explanations ranged from craft of unknown origin to reflections and rare atmospheres holding their breath. Researchers on the ground set up stations and listened to the valley's electric heart. There are minerals in the ground that can give the air charge. There are dust grains that can carry energy. The lights might be a kind of cold fire. To enter small enclosed worlds is to notice how much of life depends on what we cannot see. In southeastern Romania, a cave was found by accident in 1986 during the excavation of a power plant. Movile Cave is a capsule sealed from the surface for at least 5 million years. The air down there is layered. Oxygen is low. Carbon dioxide is high. Hydrogen sulfide streaks through the space with a smell you can taste. There is no sunlight, yet life thrives. Not with green or the familiar grip of chlorophyll, but with pale invertebrates and thin films of bacteria that feed them. Energy comes from chemistry, not daylight. Methane and hydrogen sulfide, guided by microbes, build sugars in the dark. It is chemosynthesis, the kind that helped us imagine seas on other worlds, and the possibility that life's first spark formed below in warm, mineral-rich waters. Movile hosts creatures that look borrowed from a pale, subterranean tale. Blind spiders, white millipedes, tiny scorpions untouched by light. They survive through a loop of elements where sulfur is oxidized by microbial mats that hang from the water like wet clouds. The cave feels alien because it is sealed and separate, and because it reverses the order of what we think life needs. It teaches a simple lesson. Mystery often hides behind thresholds. We assume what lies beyond is invisible until someone opens the door and reveals a different script. Far below a field in northern Mexico lies another chamber shaped by heat and patience. The Cave of the Crystals, part of the Nazca Mine, holds selenite pillars so massive they resemble slow lightning frozen in place. Some stretch 11 meters long and a meter thick. They anchor floor, wall, and ceiling like scaffolds from a dream. The air is around 50 degrees Celsius and heavy with moisture. You cannot linger there. When the cave was filled with hot, gypsum-rich water, crystals grew over hundreds of thousands of years in a quiet bath, unbroken by freezing or drying. When miners drained the water, they revealed a room sculpted by time. Scientists sampled droplets trapped inside the crystals and found microbe-like passengers dormant for tens of thousands of years. Whether these organisms count as alive is debated, but the idea that water can cradle life for so long is a gentle reminder of the deep. Across the surface, some deserts resemble planets still cooling. The Danakil Depression in Ethiopia is one of them. The ground cracks underfoot. Pools simmer in colors that look painted: yellow, green, rust. These are toxic baths of brine and acid where volcanoes breathe through thin crust. The air smells of sulfur and salt. Heat presses close. At Dalal, hydrothermal vents bring salts upward, displaying iron and sulfur chemistry in vivid patterns. Life here is pushed toward its edge. Some pools are too acidic or salty or hot for survival. Others hold clusters of microbes adapted to extremes. Research suggests thresholds beyond which life cannot persist because water structure collapses and ions overwhelm cells. But this is still a story of possibility. The edges show us the shape of what life can tolerate, drawn by real chemistry. Standing there, carefully, is to feel both scientific clarity and quiet awe. At the bottom of the world, a glacier hides a bold secret. In Antarctica's McMurdo dry valleys, where cold hardens stone and wind sculpts mountain and ice, blood falls spills from the face of the Taylor Glacier into Lake Bonny. The water is not red for drama. It is ancient brine rich in iron. When it meets oxygen for the first time in ages, the iron oxidizes and stains the ice orange red. Below, in darkness and salt, microbes survive on chemistry rather than sunlight. They breathe sulfate and iron. They endure pressure, salt, and cold through metabolic paths that do not require plants or light. When the brine reaches the air, we see their world as a rusty veil, nothing sinister, just deep water greeting shallow air with color. Where air grows warm and wet, the sky holds its own spectacle. Over Lake Maracaibo in Venezuela, near the Catatumbo River, lightning appears so regularly it has a name, Catatumbo lightning. Many nights it begins after sunset and continues for hours, flickering with a rhythm you feel in your chest. Geography is the engine. Warm, moist air rises from the lake and meets cooler air from surrounding mountains. This interplay forms persistent convection. Winds funnel down the river, cross the lake's warm surface, and lift vapor toward storm clouds. Methane from wetlands may adjust conductivity slightly, but the primary cause is the meeting of air, water, and terrain. Old stories called it the River of Fire. Science calls it a loyal storm system shaped by its valley. Not all lights and darkness belong to storms. In Norway's Hesteland Valley, glowing orbs have been studied for decades. Ideas range from electrical effects in quartz-rich rocks to combustion of airborne metal, dusts to plasmas sustained by ionized air and particles. The lights vary in color and behavior, suggesting more than one process. Even if the final answer is a blend of geology and weather, watching an orb drift and linger still feels profound. Understanding does not kill wonder. It fine-tunes it. Other lights live below ground. In certain New Zealand caves, pale blue stars glow in the dark. They are not stars, but bioluminescent larvae of fungus gnats. They hang sticky threads that shine, drawing insects that mistake the glow for escape. The larvae use a luciferin-based reaction, similar to other bioluminescent life. The cave ceiling becomes an inverted night sky, mirrored by the river below. Floating through in silence reminds you how effortlessly life paints with light. The seafloor adds another note. In the Gulf of Mexico and elsewhere, deep water hides brine lakes, pockets so salty and dense they form their own surfaces. They ripple when currents pass, and their edges bloom with bacteria. To fish, these lakes act like walls. the brine burns gills. Yet around the boundary, methane seeps upward, feeding mussels that rely on microbes to turn gas into food. A lake at the bottom of the sea is a quiet echo of familiar landscapes, repeated in another form. From brine to ice to heat, Earth's strangest places share a theme. They are precise. Their details matter. Chemical names leave tastes on the air. Temperatures dictate how long you can stay. Materials shape themselves according to simple preferences of molecules, cooling, or dissolving. The mind loves these shapes. It loves a stone that walks, a river that hides, a light that repeats its path. It also craves resolution. That is where we go next. We will hold a few puzzles longer, open them. Back in the sun, the world feels freshly peculiar. Look east across the Arabian Sea to an island shaped as if for stories not yet written. Socotra, off Yemen, rose from the ocean floor and stayed separate long enough to grow its own library of life. The air smells of resin and salt. Wind moves with a persistent hand, and monsoon curtains shape the seasons. On limestone plateaus and granitic outcrops, dragon blood trees lift umbrella crowns against the sky. Their branching limbs create dense shade that holds moisture against harsh air. Cut the bark and a red sap flows. Local people have used it for dye and medicine for centuries. The tree, Dracaena cinnabari, is an essay in adaptation. Socotra also holds frankincense trees and desert roses that swell at the base like clay pots, storing water where leaves cannot. Isolation and time eventually write strangeness as if it were poetry. Each survival strategy grows more distinct without mainland neighbors. Biologists visit Socotra not to chase myths, but to study the dignity of difference. In deserts of Namibia and Western Australia, patterns press into the land. Fairy circles are bare patches, nearly round, rimmed by taller grasses, scattered like the scales of a breathing planet. Explanations danced around them for years. Termites building underground chambers that shape water flow. Plants self-organizing through competition for moisture, spacing themselves like bubbles in foam. Recent work suggests both matter. Self-organization explains the spacing at large scale. Termite activity explains the sharp edges and longevity of specific circles. Nature offers harmony more often than solos. Bend down and touch the soil, and you feel a surface negotiated by roots, insects, water, and heat until a pattern formed that wastes little. Some patterns humble the animals trying to name them. In Tanzania, lake natron spreads in a thin film that can be as still as glass and as caustic as lye. It is a soda lake fed by hot springs rich in sodium carbonate and other minerals. The water can reach a pH of 10.5. Microbes that flourish in such chemistry bloom in rose and rust tones. Flamingos raise chicks on islands that safety lifts above the corrosive mirror. Birds that misjudge the surface or become trapped along encrusted shorelines can be preserved, their feathers stiffened by minerals. Photos posed by a photographer sparked a myth that natron petrifies life instantly. It does not. But it does show how heat, minerals, and water can turn a shoreline into a quiet museum. To be here is to walk carefully, with your stories and your feet. The truth is less dramatic, more haunting. Other waters are gentler in their oddness. In Australia's Lake Hillier, the entire surface is pink, a bubblegum oval among forest and sand. The color stays even when scooped up. It is held by living pigments. Holophilic microbes like Danakil salina and halobacteria thrive in the salty water and produce carotenoids, molecules that tint carrots and flamingos. The effect is bold, but the chemistry simple. Seen from above, the lake looks painted. Standing near it, your eyes adjust, and the color becomes more soothing, like a soft sunset made liquid. Sometimes humans become accidental machinists of mystery. In Turkmenistan, a drilling attempt once punctured a pocket of natural gas in the Karakum Desert. The ground collapsed into a pit. Gas seeped upward. In 1971, someone lit it, hoping the flame would burn off the fuel quickly. It did not. The Darvaza gas crater, sometimes called the door to hell, has burned for over 50 years. At night, it glows like a giant campfire. Heat rises against your legs when you stand at the rim. It feels like a story's beginning. It is not natural, yet its ingredients are earth, methane, spark, sky. A man-made error that revealed what the subsurface was breathing. A reminder to treat the underground with care. It is not just a resource. It is a pressurized archive. We promised sand would sing. In dunes around the world, from the Mojave to the Sahara, slopes vibrate when sand avalanches. The sound is a low hum you feel as much as hear. It can last for minutes. Dry, rounded grains roll together, and friction organizes into vibration. The dune face acts like a speaker. The pitch depends on grain size and the depth of the moving layer. Myths once claimed spirits made the sound, but the physics is clear now. It is still enchanting. You can pull your fingers through the sand and coax a note as old as the desert. And hills that pull cars. Magnetic Hill in India, Gravity Hill in other countries. Places where a car in neutral seems to roll uphill. The explanation lives in the eyes, not the hill. The horizon is hidden, trees lean, and the landscape slopes in ways that trick the brain's sense of level. Without a clean reference, perception falters. The car obeys gravity. Our inner protractor simply misreads the scene. Our senses keep us safe most of the time. Occasionally, they hand us a marvel. Now, the walking stones. In winter, a desert playa floods with a thin sheet of water that freezes. Morning sun breaks the ice into floating panels. Wind pushes the panels, which in turn nudge the stones. The stones glide on mud and melting ice, leaving paths behind. No thunder, no unseen giants. Researchers filmed the process in 2014. Stones moved at the pace of a slow walker, pushed by ice under gentle wind. When the mud dried, the trails fixed in place. The explanation is as quiet as the movement looks. Wind, water, frost, stone. A borrowed motion from a brief season. The devil's kettle, too, deserves clarity. When researchers poured dye into the pothole in winter, the colored water reappeared downstream. GPS-tagged ping-pong balls often get trapped in turbulent pockets and rarely emerge, but the water rejoins the river. No secret chute to the lake. just a hidden path through rock. A stage trick performed by geology. Relief at the solved puzzle does not erase wonder. It refines it. The next time you see a river split, you may imagine both the visible route and the churning corridor below. Some puzzles only reveal themselves from far above. In Mauritania, a circular structure called the Rejet structure, or the Eye of the Sahara, appears from space as a vast bull's eye. Concentric rings of ridges and valleys, 40 kilometers wide. Some once thought it an impact crater. Geology says it is a deeply eroded dome, layers of rock lifted and then worn differently by wind and water. Softer rings eroded into valleys. Harder rings remained as ridges, a target carved by time. Astronauts use it as a landmark, a reminder that shape can imply drama. In the quiet after a long walk, the world seems to lean in. Mystery is often treated like a riddle that must be solved and then set aside. Tonight, it feels more like a friend that stays with you even after it has told you exactly how it does its best tricks. The glow in the bay keeps glowing after you learn about enzymes. The dune keeps singing after you count the grains. The stone keeps sliding in your mind long after you have watched it ride a film of melting ice. The feeling does not settle into boredom. It becomes gratitude. There is a tenderness in this. Many of Earth's most mysterious places are also fragile. Bioluminescent bays dim when shorelines are punched with too much artificial light. Dinoflagellates are sensitive. Their population thrives when the water holds just the right nutrients and stays just the right shape. Boat traffic, pollution, and bright hotels along the shore can quiet the water's voice. To protect such bays is to say yes to night itself, to allow darkness to remain a habitat. If you ever visit, move softly. Use red light when you can. Stand in the water and watch your hand draw comets. Then let the tide rest. On the racetrack playa, stones will not move as they always have if tracks are crushed by footsteps and tires. The crust is thin. Park rangers ask visitors not to walk on the playa when it is wet, not to move the stones, not to leave footprints where the wind cannot smooth them quickly. There is a kind of hospitality asked of us, a willingness not to add our own names to every page. Caves like Muvile and Nika remind us that there are rooms in the house of Earth that are not ours. The air is wrong for our lungs. The biology evolved without our eyes. The way to show respect in such places is to enter only with purpose and to leave them mostly alone. The idea that life is adaptable should not be an excuse to test it for our curiosity. It should be a reason to marvel at the routes evolution takes and to guard the doors. The Danakil pools and places like them are delicate tapestries of chemistry. One step too close breaks crust that took time and heat to stitch. Even footsteps around the edges change how water flows and evaporates. When you visit any geothermal field, keep to the paths, both for your safety and the places. The earth is not only tough, it is also detailed. It cares about where a shoe lands. Some mysteries are tied to memory. The Nazca Lines are not only shapes on a map. They are one long conversation about water and sky, about ceremony and community. Archaeologists trace footsteps and baskets, woven and placed, People who were as real as we are, worried about similar things, thirsty in the same air. When we fly drones and take photos, let us remember that we are stepping into private meanings preserved by a forgiving desert. Looking is a privilege. At Antarctica's Blood Falls, the light is good only in certain seasons. Scientists carry sterilized tools and store samples as if they were treasure. The protocols are for accuracy, and they are also for reverence. The microbes that breathe iron lived out their quiet cycles for tens of thousands of years without knowing we would finally read their story aloud. The places that trick our eyes, like Gravity Hills, are an easy reminder that humility fits well with awe. We will misread a slope. We will mishear a dune. We will bring our own shadow to the places we visit and then learn to lay it down gently. It is all right. A good mystery grows patience in us. It grows gentler questions. Zoom out for a moment. From space, our planet is streaked with blue and white like a soft marble. And behind the cloud, so many of the places we have visited tonight are nearly invisible. The eye cannot find the exact bay that glows, the exact cave that shelters a separate life, the exact desert slope that sings. Yet they are there, threads in a weave too fine to see from afar. Up close, they become worlds. The secret, if there is one, is to let the scale of the place set the scale of the question. When the bay glows, you ask about molecules and moonlight. When the crater glows, you ask about gas and heat. When the eye in the Sahara looks up, you ask about rock and wind. Each question given in the right size opens a door. Each door leads to another room with something strange on the shelf, and a note attached that says, "Hold gently. Hold this too." Not every mystery waits in a famous place. There are edges of ordinary ponds where a thin glaze of ice, warmed by breath and cracked by a bird's foot, makes a sound like glass singing. There are evenings when the sky looks one color from the city and another around the corner from a field. There are shadows cast by two streetlights that cross and make a third shade. The patience we practice on the desert floor follows us home. We notice variations in the familiar, and they feel like a friend tapping our shoulder. Hey, the world is still more than